Computer repair guys, what is the craziest stuff you have seen on a customer's computer? I was a manager at computer repair for a retailer a couple years ago. We had a client's computer in the back running various malware and virus scans. I was doing morning paperwork in the back near the computer. This PC had its screensaver on displaying random photos from the My Pictures folder, various family members, children's birthday parties, the usual stuff. Then from then on I swear to God I saw a picture of a woman from the shoulders up with her throat cut. As soon as I realized what I was making out, I directed my full attention and it was back to photos of a car show. As the day went on I thought nothing of it and proceeded to continue my work until I was bringing another customer's PC to the back to work on, and again from my peripheral I could have sworn I saw a bloody body inbound in a trunk of a car. At that moment I began to freak out. I grabbed one of my employees, explained to him the situation. We then sat for 10 minutes and watched this screensaver. It is against company policy to search through the client's personal files without absolute just cause. We then proceeded to see a photo, 2 bodies in a shallow grave out in the woods and another photo of a severed hand down in kitchen drawer. I then went and got the general manager and informed him of the situation and had him view this screensaver. We then felt that I would be in everyone's best interest to contact law enforcement. In about 15 minutes later, owner of the computer and another gentleman show up. I proceed to tell him that his computer is not ready and it will be a while. He then informs me that he was called there because someone reported there was some photographs of a grisly murder that we had found. I showed him his computer and then his partner then begins to laugh at him. Apparently he went against police policy and took some of his work home with him and had never noticed his work photos were being used as a screensaver. TLDR, a detective unknowingly brings me his computer filled with gory homicide pictures that get mixed in with his screensaver. I soil myself thinking I am dealing with a murder. Call the cops and the detective returns to investigate his own computer. Oh crap, Alonzo, I got them pictures from the you know what as my screensaver. No worries Jake, I've got a plan. I was approached by a mutual friend, asking if I could assist her with a very delicate issue. Her brother had recently committed suicide, didn't leave a note, and they needed a user password removed to search the computer for any answers. I said I could help and told her to bring it to the shop. Why couldn't the police handle this? I don't know. The next day, she brought it in an evidence bag, along with gloves, and instructed me to wear them while handling it. When I took it out of the bag, I noticed some dried blood on the casing of the laptop. Then I opened it up. To this day, I'd say the craziest thing I've seen on a customer's computer is brain matter. The laptop had been nearby and open when he shot himself. I retract the previous winner. You win. Normal looking guy turned in his desktop for repair. Booted up to see the desktop image of a car with a lizard man having sex with the exhaust and another lizard man jizzing on the hood. A guy had a folder entirely dedicated to toilet part. From what I can tell, he would lay a massive crap in the bog, then use pink or blue toilet paper or whatever to make a rose-like flower around the turd in the bowl. It was weird because the wet paper actually looked kinda pretty and rather rose-like. They were big and took up the entire bowl. However, the crap center of each kinda ruined the magic. I have pretty much zero idea why anyone would do such a thing, let alone photograph it. The internet needed those images. We are poorer without them. One fairly trashy gentleman brought in his Windows 98 PC. This was around 2008, and his wallpaper was a rather portly nude black woman who he informed me was his ex-girlfriend. He brought in the computer several times throughout the next few months, all for silly questions about how to use the dang thing. And since we do a free checkup at the counter, I had to look. Every time his wallpaper was the same nude woman in a different pose. The last time he came in I booted it up and the wallpaper was a mirror shot of him at full mast, holding himself. I unplugged the power cable immediately. There were people behind him. Gave his computer back and told him not to come back to my shop. Ever. And now we have a policy of not touching anything running an old OS because the people who do tend to be crazy. Child P. Twice. Both guys were arrested. One time I was checking out a lady's AOL email issue. It was no big deal. She was done and out in just a few hours. A week later I get a call from her stating that we logged into her adult friend finder account and changed things. She was thoroughly embarrassed by it and was pressing charges. Police called to take a statement and we mostly just laughed about how there's no way anyone would have known she used stuff if she hadn't bitched and made a gigantic scene. She was also a lawyer. Nothing came of it. I see nudes on a near weekly basis and I don't even look for them. In fact, I've had a few couples bring in their failed external hard drives begging me to save their homemade pee. One couple made it very clear that it was okay to look. I guess that was just their thing because they paid me to hook up the hard drive, which was perfectly readable, and then copy everything to another hard drive. I work in a cowboy village where people sometimes ride up on a horse with a laptop in the saddlebag. TL. DR. Obscene dong picture wallpaper on an ancient machine. Child P. Child P. Crazy lawyer on adult friend finder. Voyeuristic amateur P makers. Cowboys with laptops. Honestly most interested in the Cowboys W laptops. Child P on desktop, as desktop background, and a screensaver. It was an interesting day at work. Had to poker face it when the police came over and arrested him as he was picking up the machine. There was a research chemist's computer that was infected with malware. I was doing a scan of his computer and there was like 10 minutes of P titles being scanned on our malware scanner. But it was so organized. There were folders like BSDM, lesbian, bestiality, straight, interracial, masturbation, insertion, etc. Then there were subfolders like Japanese, ebony or vegetables, sports equipment. This was the most organized P collector I've ever seen. Ah yes, ebony or vegetables. Easily the time I picked up an old CRT monitor off of a desk to reveal a half-eaten McDonald's burger from years past. Not as much mold as you'd think. Ha ha ha. Silly rabbit. That's not food. While working for a university IT department, I had the distinct displeasure of opening up the C drive on a professor's computer. The display default was set to large thumbnails and the only things at C were folders and one big naked mirror shot of himself. Come to find out he was big on the dating sites. Got himself a mail order bride from Brazil, and this was what he thought enticed people. TL. DR. Naked shots of 60-year-old male tax professor. Kinda the same thing happened to us. On our department shared drive, one of the researchers had a nude shot of him and his wife. Gross. My flatmate was fixing up and backing up a police officer's laptop. On the desktop was a file with a list of all the known suspected drug users and dealers in my town. CP, and I'm not talking about jailbait. He had what looked like a naked 7-year-old girl as his freaking desktop. He's in jail now. At my last IT job, I loaned my work laptop to our general manager because he needed it to make a presentation on a business trip. This was back in the late 90s when laptops were still making their way into our company. He returned it a few days later with AOL dial-up installed. In the process of removing it from my laptop, I noted the plethora of Asian ladderboy downloads and web history. I never mentioned it to him. I was too embarrassed. I mean, what kind of sick bastard uses AOL? The old Reddit kangaroo. I was working on my ex-GF's younger sister's computer. If I remember correctly, I was just removing malware and giving it a bit of a cleaning. I found 2 videos that were roughly a half hour each, of her and her BF having sex. I felt a bit guilty for watching them, but we were close in age and, well, frick you, I couldn't not watch them. In one of the videos, very shortly after they finish up and the camera is still recording, you can hear her roommates yelling up to her, telling her that someone was at the door for her. Keep in mind this is 60 some odd seconds after a quite impressive 30-minute romp. She gets dressed in seconds flat and grabs a framed picture and runs downstairs. That picture now hangs in my home. I was the person at the door, picking up the picture she had gotten for me. It's like a pornographic Twilight Zone. Got a help desk ticket one day saying some computer was unable to boot. Went over to it, opened it up, and found 2 fresh oranges. Worked tech support for Dell a few years ago. Remotely logged into a client's computer to fix his email problem. Turned out he was a UN diplomat. From some African country I think. Let me walk right into the UN's internal mail system. Saw nothing good. Just memos, meeting minutes, etc. They use that craptastic Lotus Notes browser client. Guy was a total dong too. I kinda felt like he was showing off by letting me see. He was so important he had to repeatedly remind you with his attitude. I work at a college university and I have seen some of the most distinguished professors here in the act on their work computers. What kind of an educated idiot makes the decision to take their homemade pee and place it on their work machine? Also, kiddie pee. Apparently that's the only way for someone with tenure to get fired. Oh, the stories I could tell. Was asked to try and get an old, 10 years plus, laptop working. When that failed, the lady asked me to smash it up in the garden. On doing this, a number of earwigs crawled out. Weirdest thing in a computer. You could say, sunglasses. It had a few bugs. I'm sure everyone in tech support has their pee stories, but my worst was pretty bad. I work in my college's IT department. Some kid brings in his desktop, tells us it's slow and he needs Office installed. He fills out the forms, and we get around to it about half an hour later. It took 10 minutes to boot. His desktop was a slideshow of nothing but hardcore P. Internet Explorer shortcut, renamed to P. Inside IE. He had 4 different third-party toolbars and at least 20 bookmarks for P sites. After dubbing it the Pornado and chuckling over it, and changing the desktop so our boss wouldn't get P at us, we ended up clearing out 19 various pieces of malware, including 2 rootkits. It's still a running joke to compare other sketchy computers we see to the mighty Pornado. We also do backups for students that need to have their OS reinstalled or have their entire drive re-imaged. Not only do we end up with terabytes of movies, which the sneakier technicians load onto thumb drives and take home because frick URIAAMPAA, but I have accidentally stumbled across more homemade pee featuring people I know than I want to think about. Probably the worst ever though was a laptop we got in from some really creepy skinny dude. He reeked. The laptop reeked more. The laptop reeked so badly that my boss shouted at me from across the room as soon as the guy was gone to take care of it somewhere else. This wasn't just a biological reek. This was something rank and foul like I have never smelled in my life. I opened it up and the keys were sticky. I disinfected my hands, sealed it in a bag, and we sent it to the manufacturer. 2 weeks later we got a letter telling us it had been discarded as a class something or other biohazard. We notified the guy via email and never saw him again. Thank God. There are some other sketchy ones, like the 22-year-old chick in student government, Dean's List, popular, well liked, etc., who had Harry Potter/fiction pop up as her most searched item when we went to Google to see if she had internet access, but these are the best I can think of right now. I knew someone in college that actually fits the description of the last one. Her honors thesis was on Harry Potter fandom and fanfic. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, sometimes it's Neville's turgid member. I used to work for Verizon Wireless. This hot girl buys a new phone from me, wants all her data's fed from the old to the new. So I hook her phones up to the computer and hit go. I can see the computer screen. All my co-workers behind me can also. The girl however cannot see it, and it starts to sphere her pictures. Normal looking ones at first. Then suddenly there she is naked. Then more naked. Then in very hardcore poses. Then there are things inside her, and on for like 5 minutes. There had to be 200 pictures on that phone. 180 of them are naked pictures of her. Before I knew it, everyone I work with is standing behind me drooling. I don't think the girl realized we could see what it transfers. Why can you even see that? Or why would it be necessary to see it? Oh. A friend of mine used to fix computers. One guy complained of his computer not working and brought it in. Child P was discovered. Cops were called. Pedophile arrested. That is something I hope I will not have to deal with. Old lady had her cable modem behind a big desk. Could never unplug it as needed for a power cycle. She ended up putting it and her router on a clapper. This wins. The time I was on site moving data from a 14-year-old girl's failing desktop drive to her laptop drive. Saw that the transfer was hanging on a gigantic movie. Opened it up to see if it was important. And saw her flashing her boobs over and over again. She was in the room. It would have been far more awkward had the screen been in her line of eyesight, but Luckily, it wasn't. And you two are now on a federal watchlist somewhere. I did computer repair as my own business for probably 4+ years, so I have a ton of stories I could share, but this one always stands out. A little backstory: my clientele was mostly old people, age 50+. Most of the problems they had were pretty basic: printer drivers, speed up their computer, hook something new up for them. Pretty basic stuff. Sometimes people had viruses, but surprisingly it was a pretty rare occurrence. One day, one guy who I had done some work for a few times before called me over. He was a retired pastor, with his wife of 50 years and many children and grandchildren. Mostly what I did for their family was install some software, check on some settings, that type of thing. This day, however, he told me that he had a strange problem. Every few days he would get faxes for advertisements for gay. That's kind of odd. I told him to make sure his fax number wasn't on the web anywhere, and if so, get it removed if possible. Otherwise, maybe it would be best to change their fax number. Each successive time I went over to his house after that, though, it got worse. The next time he needed me to install an internet filter because sometimes he had gay thoughts and didn't want to be tempted to look at gay p. Okay, little weird, but I installed the filter and figured maybe he had just accidentally viewed it, and as a religious person, never wanted that to happen again. So a few times later, I'm helping him set up his email in Outlook, and I ask him if he can type in his password. He says he has to look it up, so he opens up a Word document which has all his passwords. I had already told him that was probably a bad idea, but you can't force these people to do anything. So as he is scrolling up his Word document, I notice that he's scrolling past a lot of text. As I glance over, I notice it's men for men on Craigslist. Ones he's posted, ones he's responded to, talking about all sorts of interesting things. He finds his password, and at this point I just want to get out of there. But as we finish setting up Outlook, mail comes streaming in, tens, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 Craigslist postings, emails, responses, and more. So that's when I finally connect all the dots. The gay faxes, the gay p, the men for men, and here he is, a retired pastor, smiling at me next to his wife of 50 years, with his kids and grandchildren pictured in frames all around him. I didn't know what to do, so I just stopped doing repair for them. I was worried what I would find out next. The more I read these stories, the more I become convinced that you guys find yourselves doing some private investigating against your will. I used to be the manager for the technical department in a CompuServe, fairly large computer retailer. We had the guy bring in his desktop at the end of the day and say that it wouldn't boot and he didn't know why, but that it was under warranty and would like it repaired. My technician said he seemed kind of nervous and that he smelled just like a car air freshener. The tech told him it would be looked at tomorrow, and we'd call him with an estimate before doing anything beyond the diagnostic work. The next morning when I came into the shop, the whole place smelled strange, and it seemed to be emanating from the rack of incoming devices. The PC that came in at the end of the previous night seemed to be the cause, so I had a technician put the PC on the bench and try to boot it. It wouldn't post, or even give indication that it was getting power, so he opened the lid, and that's when it got really bad. It smelled terrible inside of the case, kind of like rotten asparagus, burnt sulfur and vinegar, with a slight hint of pine trees. At this point I tell the tech to move it off to the side and work on something else because I want to get more info from the customer. I called the guy and asked him what actually happened to the computer, stating that it smelled like chemicals and I didn't want my tech touching it until we knew what we were dealing with. After balking initially, he finally told me that his wife had opened the case and pee inside his computer because she had found his pee collection and she didn't like pornography. He had drained it out and then sprayed it with Lysol and let it set for a day before bringing it to us. After a few moments of silence due to my internal screaming of WTF, the customer breaks the silence and asked when it would be fixed. I started laughing, and then I calmly explained that manufacturer warranties don't cover urine damage, and that he had until the end of the day to pick up his dead computer or it was going into the trash. That was when I decided that retail management wasn't for me, and got into IT consulting about 3 months later. TLDR. Guy pisses off wife and she pee in his computer, which is not covered under warranty repairs. Not exactly on the computer, but this one always makes me laugh. Way back in the day when the ATX motherboard first came out, a customer bought one. If you recall, they weren't a perfect rectangle like now, but were sort of L-shaped. I don't know how to describe it, but it wouldn't fit in their case. So, they simply sawed off the other part of the motherboard. After all, it had the SCSI controller on it. Their drives were right, so they didn't need that. Then the screws didn't line up, so he drilled a hole and tried to hold it in with a sheetrock screw and glue. We know this because he brought it in to try and return it. One of those things I'll never forget. Good times. Well, the pee thing, of course. Although that was always kind of awkward because I'm a chick and guys were always like, yeah, you know, whatever. But 2 stories trump all my others. 1. A guy came in with a desktop computer and said that he couldn't get it to work. I put it on our counter and started hooking it up to the monitor to see what he was talking about. When he sees me doing this, he says, "Oh, I need a monitor." I laughed a little, thinking he was trying to be funny. He was not trying to be funny. He thanked me, grabbed the computer, and left. I just stood around awkwardly while I processed what had just happened. 2. A mother comes in with her teenage daughter to transfer what was on the girl's old computer to her new laptop. The mother felt the need to go on about what a great kid her daughter is. This girl looked like a grimy mess, but whatever. We're transferring everything, and her pictures included shots of her and her boyfriend having sex. Not really shocking, until we see a close-up of her crotch and she had her boyfriend's name shaved into her pubic hair. Her boyfriend's name was Tito. Grimy yes indeed. I've been a student worker at my university for about 3 years, and I have to say, the craziest thing I've seen was a laptop of a male student who had pictures of his naked girlfriend all over the desktop, who also sat down next to me while I was fixing his computer and acted like there was absolutely nothing awkward or wrong. Peas. First post 2. Yay. I had to repair a laptop for a friend. His complaint was that it gave him a lot of blue screens. Did a quick check of the basics, and nothing seemed out of order. I updated all I could, let it run in overnight, and still no errors. Strange. The next day, I returned it to him and asked, "When do you get these blue screens?" He hesitated for a sec, and said, "Well, when I watch P on YouPorn." I went to YouPorn, and surely, his system crashed. Assuming it was something to do with Flash Player or a video related issue, I checked YouTube, but no errors there. The errors were only occurring on YouPorn. I was on the verge of giving up, until I realized I hadn't done a disk check yet. I ran check disk, and the result was surprising. Apparently the disk location of a YouPorn cookie had an error, causing the crashes. The first time ever I encountered someone's computer broke because he was watching too much P. I helped a friend build a computer, but he wanted to keep his big HDD, which was fine with me. He told me that I could go through and purge most of his files in a folder called Pictures, which was a 52.3 GB folder. I had a look in for a lark. I know hat I shouldn't have, I'm sorry, and I found a folder, 17 GB, that was normally invisible and password protected by a program called Folder Locker. Inside was 17 GB of hardcore furry pee and clop. At least it was supposed to be hidden. Most people just leave porno on their desktops apparently. This wasn't crazy in itself, but in combination with what he brought the computer in to be repaired for, it was. He had a bunch of viruses and tracking cookies from P sites, and his background was the 10 Commandments. I'm not really sure how it would feel to go from looking at P to looking at "Thou shalt not commit adultery." A buddy of mine I work with went over to the local Catholic church to install some print drivers for their copier. With the priest standing over his shoulder, he opens the downloads folder and is greeted by 100 or so P videos. The priest doesn't even flinch. He said it was most uncomfortable he had ever felt. Bugs, as in little white things running in between the keys, in and out of the keyboard. Yup, that one got sealed in a plastic bag and disposed. A couple interesting ones in my years. Not a PC, but I used to work for a company with many laser printers. I got a call that one smelled really bad, so I went to check it out. Sure enough, Smelled like crap. Took it down to the shop to tear it down and clean it, and inside we found several dead mice. We threw that nasty thing away. I once worked on a PC in that was so filled with dirt and dust that the entire case was filled. Not just a little film or a ball of dust. The whole case was filled with that nasty fuzz dirt dust crap. Nasty. As you can probably guess, the board had blown several caps and was causing rebooting. I once worked on a PC for a friend and had to reload his OS. He asked me to move his pictures and such over, but kindly asked that I not look at them. Of course I intended to oblige, but through a series of unintended consequences I ended up seeing thumbnails of some of his photos, many of which were his wife involved in an all-African American gangbang. They are a white couple. I suppose she had a fetish. Middle-aged married man and his wife dropped off a desktop with a failing hard drive. The man insisted that I do everything I could to recover data from the nearly dead drive. We went through the trouble of getting some dry ice and keeping it frozen while we transferred the data. It worked. The drive started to read and copy. What was on the drive? 300 gigs of raw, nasty HD quality GAP. He paid $400 for us to recover the data. His wife didn't know. 3 years ago when I was still in school, a guy I knew brought his tower to school for me to fix. I took it home, opened it up, and god dang, it was full of used napkins and 2 dead mice. I put on 3 pairs of rubber gloves, cleaned it all out, got the PC working again and took it back to school. Gave the guy his used napkins and dead mice back in a clear plastic bag for all to see. I was cleaning up a customer's computer. Just the basic stuff like clear temp files and stop certain programs from running on startup. Well, when I deleted their temp files they had 30 gigs of temp files and a desktop full of random pictures and files. Once worked on a PC with an inch of dust on the inside and a 160 GB hard drive filled with i.e. temporary internet files. A C cleaner had to be left on overnight. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.